Rolling Stone themselves are guilty of trivializing evil. It's just like a Leave It to Beaver story that went bad.
It's 1:40 in the morning.
Vitamins and the right books in his house.
It's July 21st.
Now, I think that Islam has a lot to do with it, because Islam is a fallback for any absolute
document the activity on This Is Not Anonymous JA on Facebook.com.
And so if you're an Italian communist, you end up in the
Clyde
Red
Lewis
Brigade,
is in the background on Ground
kidnap
Zero.
Aldo Moro, you hold him prisoner, and then you kill him after a while. The average Italian communist would never do that. The average Muslim would never do what this guy did, but there's a certain type of person that will look for the most absolute expression of an ideal, and that is a real danger. And until the group comes clean about that aspect of its ideology, they couldn't confront it. So the Italians did it.
December 17, 2011.
He renounced the certain aspects of communism, and there's a form of Islam which is renounced this stuff, which is called the Ahmadiyyan form of Islam. And I think that the intellectuals of the world are the ones who are most in crisis about
December
what's going on in the world, because they pretend to be able to interpret everything and analyze everything. And and Dante
this is 5 days after 12.
Representing his intellect and his lying, representing his passions of his emotions and his links, his physicality. But it's the mind, it's that wolf, that's the cunning, that's the part that produces all this stuff. And I'm being a little disjointed here because I'm tired. But one of the points that Whittaker Chambers made, who outed what's his name, who was the spy under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was that the liberals' character structure is so close to the communists. They have such a tendency to want to move in that absolutist direction to achieve his ideal, that they were more than willing to join in on just saying horrible things about him. And I think that Rolling Stone magazine, a lot of people in the intellectual and especially of the news business, whatever, they're willing to trivialize this and act as if there's some kind of question about it. And they're not really qualified.
But there is a question about it, Roy. You got to understand, there always are questions. And to just say that he's a killer without his trial, just because the court of public opinion says so, means absolutely BS to me.
But the thing is, we keep coming up with these people, like the shooter at Fort Hood and whatever, and we keep acting like there's this great mystery. It's not as big a mystery as all that. The guys that kidnapped Aldo Moro are hardly different than the guys that just did this. They're looking for, what's the word here, supremacy, primacy. They're looking for primacy and to be known. And there are so many losers out there in the world that have no, remember Don Juan, Carlos Castaneda, you have to have that link to the spirit. When you lose your link to the spirit, what are you? You're lost. You're out there being all cruel, vengeful. You have no control of yourself. But what's interesting is what you pointed out about Hastings, because Hastings represents the countercurrent to the intellectuals who are inclined to go along with absolutism, because they have a kind of underlying hysteria that prompts them to move toward the Obama pseudo-hook and chains absolute control. And Hastings went against it. That's who writes an article about the Democrats are abandoning civil liberties. That's it. It's over. And then even on the right, I talked to conservative people who had the same thing. Some of them defend the NSA, and I don't know why the NSA needs all that information. I don't know why they need it. So there's like a winnowing now of the attitude, as it were.
Yeah, well, the Democrats, if you want to get into the politics of it all, the Democrats all are abandoning civil rights. Yeah. The Republicans are enabling it as well. That's why I say, and I'm very careful. People will say, well, Clyde, you are talking politics. No, I'm not. I try to keep Democrat, Republican out of it because, that makes it even more sickening. Because that means, again, we can divide ourselves and identify with a group of morons. And that's how I feel about politics in general. Because I can tell you the conspiracy has no political interest whatsoever. It moves within government like a cancer moves through, or a psychosis moves through a mob. It's exactly what we're in the middle of now. You cannot say that one mob is better than the other mob. They're both mobs, and they are running the government like a mob. We're seeing the deaths of journalists. We're seeing the media being commandeered and turned into a mouthpiece for the civil unrest and social war. And now we're seeing Rolling Stone, which is supposed to be an independent rock magazine, putting a clown out of its element, basically putting a guy on the front page who's an accused bomber, doing so for reasons that I can't figure out, only that Michael Hastings, of course, the reporter that tried to blow the whistle like Greenwald and Snowden and others, ended up dead in a car crash. And now we're wondering if maybe this is a big middle finger to the system.
But you got it right. It's moves through the mob thing like a psychosis. I'm not as much of a conspiracy theory guy as you are. I'm more like a collusion, which turns into conspiracy. There's a collusion there of various types of complexes, and one of the complexes that Rolling Stone has is you grew up in the suburbs, life was okay, this is not big of a deal, let's just figure out what he did, and they're in a sense trivializing it. But I wasn't as turned off by the cover as when I first saw it. When I read the subtext there, it didn't bother me. If they had put up his picture like that, and a picture of the bombing aftermath, then they would have made an honest statement.
So they're not giving a balanced view, in your opinion?
Yes, that's what's missing, yes.
Okay. Well, valid point, Roy. I thank you for the call.
Thanks, Roy.
Take care, bye-bye. 888, he says it's not balanced. Maybe he's correct. I have not seen the article. I have only seen the picture. I looked at the picture and saw it as an ironic, sickening thing. Reminded me, once again, of some of the things I've always been afraid of, and that is something that I've always trusted, or something that I trust would not betray me or bite me in the ass, did so. Rolling Stone magazine, with the cover, Sanariev on the cover of Rolling Stone. I guess it was just shocking to see Charles Manson on the cover back when he made the cover of Rolling Stone. 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. More calls to get to, more opinions. Loving the opinions and the discussion. I feel it's vital that we talk about this, and I think it's vital that we load the phones up tonight and discuss this openly about what this might mean. Is the press, is this a turn from the press against the Obama administration, especially Rolling Stone, that many people consider a liberal magazine, a turn with Michael Hastings dead, with Sanariev on the front cover? Are they rubbing in the face of the Obama administration, or are they just doing this to ratchet up the terror and nightmare that is our country right now? 888-673-3700. It's 888-673-3700. We will be back with more, and your calls don't go away. You're listening to Ground Zero. We'll be back.
You are listening to Ground Zero Continuum.
FM News 101 KXL.
I truly hope you never have to, but if you ever need to use a firearm to
separate
protect yourself or your loved ones,
and work that I have done, investigative work I've done on the border, that the Mexican military was connected to Sinaloa. So they're the one cartel that continually we get reports that are connected to governments, as opposed to, the Los Zetas and the Carrillo Fuentes cartel, La Familia Michoacan. None of those cartels do I have any reports are connected to government in any way.
That's amazing. So all of it's about money. And yeah, it is. And the thing is the scenario that you just laid out is a lot better than the one I imagined. I was afraid what you were going to say was that those guns that were being returned actually were Army guns that came out of our armories. Now that would be the ultimate embarrassment, I would think. Although it's pretty much of a stretch to embarrass our government over anything. They just walk right past it.
They seem to, don't they? And nothing seems to shame them on any level. And part of that is the problem that we have with media in this country, which does not hold those in power accountable for any of the decisions that they make or any of the failed policies that are in place. We don't hold them accountable to any of it.
Well, unless you're a Michael Hastings, he was on this program, and we see what happened there, which leads me to we don't completely know what happened, but whatever it was, it doesn't look as though truthfully it occurred as it has been presented to us. So don't you, when you see things like this happening, and he's not the only one. Don't you feel a heat at some time by not towing the MSM line, particularly since you were in the MSM for a while?
I've been asked that a number of times. I really don't sweat it. As I've told people before, I think all of our days are numbered, and so what you do with your days is what counts. However many you have. In the Hastings case, I've talked to a number of people who knew Michael well, and those who are attempting to look into his death, I think most people who have looked at it feel that it's likely that something happened there that it certainly does not go along with the official story. What's difficult about it are some of the stumbling blocks that seem to be put up by police investigating this, who just simply don't want to release much information on it. And I think that's, part of what leads to so much speculation on a lot of these issues, is that we do have, especially in these cases, it's just a real lack of transparency and the lack of information. And certainly when you look at the Hastings case from the outside and say, well, here's a car that supposedly was a single car crash, and his engine was thrown from the vehicle as far as it was, and the vehicle completely engulfed in flames, and yet the tree he hit seemed to be undamaged. There's just a lot of questions about the circumstances surrounding this, and then you don't get answers to it, and that certainly doesn't help put anyone's faith in the official story.
Well, yeah, and you see these unbelievable car crashes that somebody will catch with a dash cam or something, where the car is just obliterated. In fact, one of the cable channels did a series. I think it was called The Indestructibles, and I mean, these vehicles are just like bursting into parts all over the place. These people live through it, and except in the movies, you really don't see, particularly cars like Mercedes-Benz, higher-end machines like that. They don't burst into flames like that without help. They really don't. I mean, they crash these things all the time with fuel in them. If they blew, it's not like, for a while, some of the police cars were catching some flack because, if it got hit from the back at 80 miles an hour, it might burst into flames. It's like, well, yeah, the gas tank's back there, but he didn't hit the tree, the undamaged tree, by going 80, 90 miles an hour in reverse. So that whole thing just looks odd. And then the family wanted his remains sent to them. And instead, it's like, nope, straight to the crematorium. It just doesn't look good. None of it looks good. And then when you look into issues, for instance, like some of what Michael Hastings was looking into just before he died as well, that he was working on a story regarding Jill Kelly, the woman who was connected to General David Petraeus, who of course had been the acting CIA director. When you see that he's getting into those kinds of stories, and this is the same reporter who brought down Stanley McChrystal, so he's clearly on a lot of folks' radar. And then beyond that, we certainly see that he is, continuing to work on these provocative stories. Certainly nothing that should be endangering his life, and yet, we see that case. We see Andrew Breitbart, and a lot of folks. Listen, I don't know the facts around those stories, but a lot of people talk to me about these and have a lot of concerns when they see journalists who suddenly drop dead or die in some very sudden, dramatic way that does not seem, again, to line up with a lot of what the official story looks like. So, there's certainly, I think, should be a concern. I think when we can take a look at the overall treatment of journalists in this country right now, who are doing their best to really report what's going on in this country, and even journalists abroad. Look, one of the biggest dangers for journalists around the world are not journalists in the United States, but journalists in other countries who are being targeted by our government as well. Journalists in Yemen who are being held because they simply report on drone strikes. And our government is actively and openly persecuting those journalists who are overseas. And so there are a lot of journalists in the United States, and a lot of even more broadcasters, I should say, who really are able to cover stories fairly safely. But there are journalists around the world that our government is working actively to create great numbers of problems for, and to lock up and to imprison. And it's a terrible situation for a country that pretends to be a beacon of freedom and liberty around the world. Now, you may not want to go here, but I'm just wondering, why is Mexico, going back to Mexico for a minute, why is Mexico so screwed up down there? Is it because 75 years the same party was in power? Is it just corrupt all over the place? What's the deal? They have strategic minerals, they have precious metals, strategic metals, they have oil, they have beautiful coastlines. They have everything down there.